You're Albert, aren't you? I'm Grace. I bet you know loads about this place.
Might be.
See, I've got a local history project and nothing ever happens around here.
I think you could be wrong there, love.
Alright, my name's Albert. When Grace said nothing ever happens around here, it set me wondering how many people know almost nothing about Roundhay's history. Some very interesting things happened around here. Well, I have no family left, so I've written some notes and decided to make this recording whilst I can still remember. Right. When the Viking king Canute died, England collapsed into competing earldoms under a weak Viking king called Edward the Confessor. Edward died in 1066 without producing a male heir or naming a successor. A strong English earl called Harold Godwinson, who was a descendant of Viking King Canute, had himself crowned King of England. William of Normandy, also of Viking descent, said Harold Godwinson had promised him the throne. William even persuaded the Pope to declare him our rightful king before he invaded near Hastings, killing Harold and defeating his army. Here in the north of England, some powerful English earls with strong Danish connections didn't want William to be king. William paid them to go home to Scandinavia, but they didn't budge. Over the next 2 years, William hunted down his enemies. He brutally killed many and crushed the revolt. The conqueror made no effort to control his fury. He punished the innocent along with the guilty and ordered homes, villages, crops, animals, tools and food stores to be burnt to ashes. York was destroyed. Early in 1070, William split his army into smaller groups and sent them out to burn, loot and terrify everybody they could find. More than 100,000 people starved to death. Historians call this terrible slaughter the harrying of the North. Roundhay, or Roundhay, got its name from the circular hay or round enclosure the Normans created 900 years ago on one of the huge tracts of land granted by William to Ilbert de Lacy of Pontefract Castle. They were Ilbert's reward for his part in the harrying. Roundhay's name was first written down in a charter in 1153 when Henry de Lacy gave the abbot of Kirkstall Abbey agricultural lands next to the Roundhay. The Roundhay was one of about 2,000 hunting parks enjoyed by members of William's Norman aristocracy. Its perimeter ditch and bank was 6 miles round. A section of the ditch near Roundhay Grange is still 20 feet wide and 10 feet deep. The earth bank was topped with a fence made from vertical bales of wood. About 250,000 tons of earth was moved and thousands of trees were cut down. It were a massive job. So with many victims of the harrying starving and burned out of their homes, we can guess how Ilbert de Lacy found the labourers he needed. In 1212, King John, the man who was forced to sign the Magna Carta 3 years later, visited the Roundhay. He spent 3 days here hunting. He brought fine horses and 200 mastiffs, big greyhounds to track and kill the deer. Sometimes archers would just wait by the lawns near the hunting lodge for deer to be driven out, or to be attracted by the rich grass and the sight of other animals standing calmly, because they were tied up there with rope and couldn't run away. The field names Great Lawn, Little Lawn and Roke Close still appear on maps of Cobble Hall Farm today. The Roundhay boundary is still there in today's property deeds. Go and look at the unexpected kink in the road by St Catherine's Walk where Gladow Lane crosses the ancient boundary. By 1803, the Roundhay estate was owned by Charles Stourton, 17th Baron Stourton. It was reckoned to be poor agricultural land with less than a dozen farmhouses and small unproductive fields, so he decided to sell. The 1,300-acre estate was bought for £58,000, around 6 million today, by Quaker Thomas Nicholson, who was 38 and wanted his own country estate, and his business partner, a property speculator called Samuel Elam, who was just 29. Samuel had inherited his father's money in 1794. He became a partner in a bank and he was what they call an opportunist, investing wherever he reckoned he could make more money. But Roundhay was isolated, and the only way to get here was by old cart tracks. Sadly, there were 5 years of delays in building the new Leeds Wetherby Turnpike Road, and nobody wanted to buy Samuel's land for building. The delay helped push him into bankruptcy and then early death in 1811 when he was just 37. Elam's portion of the estate was sold in parcels. Some of it was bought by Thomas Nicholson. The Turnpike Road finally opened in 1810. Soon, elegant stone mansions were being built, set in extensive grounds owned or rented by the middle classes, such as rich merchants who were here moving away from poor people and the smells of Leeds. Thomas Nicholson was born at Chapel Allerton, son of a modest Anglican clothier and Quaker mother. From 1788 to 1806, Thomas lived at a fashionable address in London's Finsbury Square, where he was listed as an insurance broker. To pay for Britain's part in the fighting, our government had to borrow huge amounts of money from banks. When he was 34 in 1799, Thomas bought Chapel Allerton Hall Estate as an investment and let it to tenants. His new Roundhay estate was carefully planned with a mansion, stables, walled garden, parklands, waterfalls, ornamental lakes, even some follies, the hermitage and the castle. By 1815, Thomas had bought the extra land necessary to begin creating Waterloo Lake. It cost him £15,000, that's about 1.4 million today. In 1802, Thomas formed a business partnership with his half-brother Stephen Nicholson, who became Thomas's heir. In the 1800s, both Thomas and Stephen were underwriters at Lloyd's. In 1813, they founded a prosperous bank called Nicholson, Jansen & Co. in Threadneedle Street, London, where the Bank of England is today. They also founded the Union Bank in Leeds. Thomas and his wife Elizabeth were Quakers. They had no children. When Thomas died in 1821, aged just 56, Stephen inherited Thomas's business interests and estate. Stephen had married Sarah Rhodes, the daughter of a wealthy Leeds merchant, but they had no children. In 1824, Stephen was tenant at Brame Wood, which is now called Cobble Hall. He was busy building houses at Springwood, Roundhay Lodge and North Hill, which became their new home. By 1815, Methodists were meeting on Chapel Lane, now North Lane. The local Anglican parish church was at Barrack in Elmet, which wasn't very convenient. Using money Thomas left to his widow Elizabeth, Stephen completed Thomas and Elizabeth's plans to build Roundhay St John Church and its public burial ground on Wetherby Road. It opened in 1826. He soon added Roundhay St John School to the almshouses. When Elizabeth died in 1833, Stephen and Sarah moved into the mansion. In 1827, Stephen's nephew William Nicholson Phillips had married Martha Rhodes, a close relative of Stephen's wife Sarah Rhodes. 11 days later, William changed his name to Nicholson and became Stephen's heir. In 1840 there was a terrible tragedy when William mistakenly shot and killed his uncle's gamekeeper. It was night time and William thought someone was trying to get into his home. The mistake affected William's mind for the rest of his life. He demolished the house where the tragedy occurred, even though he'd lived there for 30 years and happier memories must have been made there. Stephen died in 1858, aged 80. When Sarah died in 1862, aged 74, William and Martha moved into the mansion. William died 6 years later, aged 64. He left 13 children and many, many grandchildren. Martha got £4,000. That's about £500,000 in today's money. The estate was to be sold and William's executors didn't seem to make satisfactory progress. A bill of complaint went to the Court of Chancery and the executors were replaced with independent agents. There were 2 auctions and several private sales. William's Chapel Allerton and Gledow properties were auctioned before the Roundhay auction took place in 1871. James Kitson was the eldest of 6 children. Born 1807 at his father's pub in Leeds, he learned the trade but was apprenticed to a local dye works. When his father died of drink, James helped his mother sort out his father's tangled business affairs and look after the younger children. He took classes in chemistry and became fascinated by railway and locomotive design. Just before his 21st birthday, he married his wife Anne, and they had 11 children, though only 6 of them survived infant diseases. By 1935, when railway mania was sweeping the country, James started to follow his dream. In 1838, his first railway engine, Lion, was built for the Liverpool and Manchester Railway. Lion was restored in 1927 and in 1953 it starred in the Ealing Studios film The Tipfield Thunderbolt. You can see it at Liverpool. James eventually owned the Airedale Foundry in Hunslet and Monksbridge Ironworks. Around 6,000 Kitson steam railway locomotives were built and sold all over the world. He was Mayor of Leeds in 1860 and 1861. In 1862 his son took over management of the locomotive business and James bought Roundhay Lodge from William Nicholson. In 1865 James employed architects to redesign his home and set it in lavish grounds. He named it Elmet Hall and he lived there until he died 20 years later. John Barron was a lifelong Baptist and promoted temperance. From the 1850s, he and his family supported British workman pubs, offering tea and coffee instead of alcohol. By 1871, there were 16 of them in Leeds. John believed in technical education. He was the founder-governor of the Yorkshire College, which became Leeds University. His kindness and generosity were well known, and so was his modesty. When money was collected for a statue of him, he politely rejected the idea. In 1871, while John was Mayor of Leeds, he and some associates bought Nicholson's estate at the auction for £139,000. That's about £16.5 million today. They proposed what became scornfully known as a park for nothing. Their big idea was that Leeds would buy the land from them. About 300 acres would become a public park for Leeds citizens. The rest would be tenanted farms or sold as building plots for high-class villas. John claimed the sales of the building land would pay for the new park, just as sales of plots on Bow Lane had paid for its widening. John and his associates sought an Act of Parliament enabling Leeds Corporation to buy the land from them, even though the land lay outside the city's boundary and would have cost more than the corporation's £50,000 spending limit. There was a big public argument. James Kitson and others of the Roundhay aristocracy strongly objected to ordinary folk of Leeds taking holidays on their doorstep. Leeds artist John Atkinson Grimshaw was commissioned to paint 3 pictures of the park to help persuade Parliament. On the 8th of June 1872, 50,000 people walked to the park demonstrating their support for the idea. The next day, 100,000 people walked. Parliament agreed, and the 260,000 strong population of Leeds bought the land. 3 months later, Roundhay Park was formally opened by Prince Arthur in front of a crowd of 100,000 people. In 1873, a prize of £500, that's about £60,000 in today's money, was offered for a plan to develop the park. It was won by a Scottish architect working in Leeds called George Corson. He went on to design many other Leeds buildings, including the Grand Theatre, Leeds Central Library, the Education Offices on George Street, Francis Lupton's Textile Warehouse in Wellington Street, and the Lupton family homes at Newton Hall in Potter Newton and Beechwood at Roundhay. The Luptons were a large, influential local family. Francis Lupton was the great-great-grandfather of our future Queen Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge. Catherine's relative, Bessie Lupton, gave Mrs. Lupton's field opposite the almshouses on Wetherby Road to the people of Leeds, so it could never be built on. George Corson's grand plan for the new park included a great entrance lodge, boathouses, refreshment rooms, swimming pool, even a cricket ground. He reckoned it would cost him £36,000, which was too expensive for the ratepayers of Leeds. His plan included profitably developing an area of very expensive villa plots to the east of Old Park Road, which Connaught Road is still there under the grass of soldiers' fields. The newspapers were very rude to Baron and called his grand scheme a white elephant. It was hard for ordinary people to get to Roundhay Park, so it was mostly being enjoyed by richer people. There wasn't even a tap, so in 1882 Baron piped water from Eckup Reservoir and built a monumental drinking fountain, all at his own expense. In 1874, Baron helped found the Leeds, Roundhay and Osmonthorpe Railway Company to help bring people to Roundhay, but the route wasn't expected to pay its way, so in 1877 he gave up. In 1878 they started to build Park Avenue, improving public access to the park, and Princes Avenue, which connected Roundhay Road to Street Lane and Moortown. In 1876, Baron was elected Liberal MP for Leeds, and later on he represented Otley. When he lost his seat in 1895, John's loyal service was rewarded by making Baron a Baron. When he died in 1905, aged 83, thousands lined the streets and followed the funeral procession of this much-loved grand old man of Leeds.
For this is our opening day. This is our opening day. Hurrah, hurrah, hurrah. Hurrah, hurrah, hurrah. We welcome our royal Prince